Okay, let's dive right in. You've probably heard all the buzz about the massive bipartisan infrastructure law, right? Well, what's actually going on inside H.R. 3684? In this explainer, we're going to crack it open and see exactly where the money is headed and what it's trying to build.
That's the big question, isn't it? You hear $1 trillion and wow, that number is just so huge, it's hard to even wrap your head around. But this law is more than just concrete and steel. It's this sprawling vision for the country's future. So let's peel back the layers and see where the money is really going.
Before we get into the what, it's worth taking just a second to talk about the how. You know, any huge law like this has a story, and getting this one passed was a real marathon.
So this bill went through the whole 9 yards. I mean, it was introduced, debated, it passed the House, then the Senate, all back in 2021. Then they had to iron out the differences before it was finally signed into law on November 15th. It's a really complex dance that turned this proposal into a real nationwide project.
All right, to make sense of this beast of a law, we've broken it down into 4 big chunks. We'll kick things off with the classic stuff you see every day, your roads, rails, and bridges. Then we'll get into the modern essentials, like our power grid and broadband internet. From there, we'll look at our foundational resources, water systems, and environmental resilience. And finally, we'll wrap up with the super important Buy American rules that kind of govern the whole thing.
Let's start with the most visible part of this whole law. This is the stuff you literally see and drive on every single day, the transportation arteries that connect the whole country. This section is all about bringing that core network into the 21st century.
And look, this is way more than just filling in a few potholes. Yeah, a huge chunk of the money is for fixing up roads and bridges, but the law also pumps some serious cash into modernizing passenger rail, expanding public transit, and even funding brand new safety programs for pedestrians.
And this is where you can see just how detailed this thing gets. It's not just about paving highways. It's setting up brand new pilot programs, like this one for wildlife crossings. I mean, how cool is that? It's all about making roads safer for both animals and drivers, which just shows you this is a much more modern way of thinking about infrastructure.
This also shows the law is really focused on the long game. Funding for Amtrak, it's reauthorized all the way through fiscal year 2026. So this isn't just some quick fix. It's a multi-year promise to make passenger rail stronger across the entire country.
Okay, but modern infrastructure is about so much more than just getting from point A to point B. The law also makes a massive investment in the networks that power our daily lives, from the electric grid to the internet that connects us all.
The main goal here is basically future-proofing America's connections. That means beefing up our aging power grid to make it more resilient, building out a whole national network of EV chargers, getting high-speed internet to communities that are still left out, and making sure our supply chains for clean energy are secure.
Let's take electric vehicles, for example. This is a perfect illustration of that forward-thinking approach. The law sets up grant programs specifically to build a public EV charging network. The goal? Super simple. Make it just as easy to find a charger on a road trip as it is to find a gas station today. And when it comes to closing that digital divide, the law has this really smart 3-part strategy. First, you got to figure out where the problem is, right? So it funds detailed mapping. Second, it invests in what's called middle-mile infrastructure. Think of it like the major highways of the internet. And then third, it helps people actually afford the service once it gets there.
All right, moving on to our third big area. And this one, well, you could argue it's the most essential infrastructure of all. We're talking about the systems that give us clean water, handle our waste, and protect us when disaster strikes. The investments here are just massive, and they're hitting these environmental challenges from all sides. I'm talking about ensuring our drinking water is safe by replacing old pipes, upgrading our wastewater systems, cleaning up pollution from decades ago, and making us more resilient to things like floods and wildfires.
And this isn't just about building shiny new things. A big part of it is about cleaning up our own mess from the past. The law puts a lot of money towards tackling that legacy pollution, cleaning up hazardous industrial sites known as Superfund and brownfield sites, and reclaiming old abandoned mines.
The law is really smart about how it tackles water quality, kind of from 2 directions. You've got the drinking water programs, which are all about what comes out of your tap. Think reducing lead contamination.
Then you have the clean water programs, which are focused on what goes down the drain, funding big upgrades for sewage treatment and stormwater systems.
And once again, you see that this is a long-term play. Key funding programs are locked in all the way through 2026. This is not a one-and-done deal.
Okay, last but certainly not least, let's talk about the rule book. Because, it's one thing to have all this money for projects, but it's a whole other thing to set the rules for how they get built. And this part is absolutely critical to the law's whole design. Right at the heart of this is the Buy America provision. It's actually pretty simple. If a project is getting federal money from this law, it has to use iron, steel, and other manufactured goods that are made right here in the USA. But the law isn't totally inflexible. There is a little bit of wiggle room. You can get a waiver from this rule, but only if you can't find the materials here. Or, and this is the key part, if using American-made stuff would jack up the total project cost by more than 25%.
So let's pull back and look at the big picture. When you boil it all down, the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act really stands on these 4 legs: fixing our old roads and rails, building the clean energy grid of the future, making sure everyone has access to clean water and fast internet, and doing it all with American-made stuff.
The goal here is huge. The law itself calls it a historic investment to rebuild, repair, and revitalize America's foundational infrastructure for the next generation. It's really a blueprint designed not just to patch up the cracks, but to build a stronger, more connected, and more competitive America.
It's a massive, massive effort. And it kind of leaves us with one final question to chew on. This law is investing in the infrastructure we know we need today, but what's next? What are we going to need to build for tomorrow? That's definitely something to think about.